In today's lesson, we'll be talking about the layer marks, right? Which is one of the most important things you need to understand when using Photoshop, right? So the layer marks basically has to do with the layers panel, which we tackled in the previous lesson, right? So the layer marks deals with the layers panel, right? Now, what are layers? So layers are just stacks of transparent graphics or transparent adjustments down on top of another layer. Okay, let me use a new file to explain what I'm trying to say. So when we come to new, and let's say we come to this particular graphic, so we have this background right here, right? So if I'm to pick, let's say, a square, right, and then I draw a square on it, a blue square on it, you can see right on top here that a new layer has been created on top of this background layer. You get? So when you look here, this is the background layer, and then a new layer has been created on top of this new layer, right? So let's say if I want to clean the square, I can just come for my erase tool, and then I'll come and select this layer. I'll come for my erase tool, rasterize the image, and then I can clean the square. You get? Let me hit Ctrl Z, right? Now, why are layers important? Layers are important for this reason. Okay, one reason why layers are important is that if, let's say, for instance, I just had this image, right, and then I came to let's say paint something on it, right? So I just came to paint on this canvas. So I painted this thing on this canvas, the yellow canvas that we have right here, right? Without the layers, if I now want to clean, look at what will happen. If I select the eraser and I clean, it is going to clean, leaving it to the background, right? Therefore, the background color set here is orange. That's why it has turned into orange. Let me just change the background color to white, right? A minute. So let me just change the background. So if I clean, you can see that it has now cleaned the entire background layer that we have, right? So that is one of the most important reasons why layers are important. Let me take what I just did again. So if we have this square on top of this background, so we have this square on top of this background here right now, right? So if we want to make any adjustment or want to reposition this, we can just click it and then we can reposition it on the background layer or on the canvas, right? Unlike if on this canvas we just came to paint, or we just came to draw a square on top of this canvas like this, or we came to do anything on top of this canvas. Looking here, you can see that there's no layer. This is on that same sheet, right? So think about it as an exercise book. Okay, with the first one, on a transparent layer, we draw. So we draw on a transparent layer and then put it on top of our original exercise book sheet, right? So if we do that, we'll be able to just remove that transparent layer. We'll be able to make adjustment to that transparent layer. But with this one, we draw on the actual sheet, and because you draw on the actual sheet, you don't have the chance to move anything on this actual sheet. If you even want to clean it, you end up cleaning the entire background sheet. You get? So that is one of the reasons why layers are important, right? Now let's move to this image so I explain the flexibilities of layers and how you can use layers in a very creative manner. So if you come here, you can look here that we have a lot of layers stacked on top of each other. And the first thing that I would be teaching you is how to make a layer visible and then how to make a layer invisible. Okay, so let's say, for instance, let's go back here. Let me hit Ctrl Z, right? So let's say we now have this rectangular layer on top of this background layer, right? If you want to turn up the visibility of this layer, you can see that we have an eye icon right here, right? When you click on this eye icon, the layer is now turned off. When you click on it, the layer is turned on, right? Similarly, when we come to this image right here, let me look for, so we have our subject, this subject to be on this layer, right? So this is its layer, right? So if I turn off this subject, you can see that the subject is no longer there, right? If I bring the subject is now back on top because we now have the subject there, right? Unlike the first one, if let's say we merge everything, if you want to merge everything on this layer, you can just hold Shift, Control and E on your keyboard and everything will be merged, right? Now look at this. If I turn off this layer, everything is turned off on the canvas, right? So that is the reason why we need to work with layers, right? Let's go to Control Z, right? So we are now back to our layers. So with the layers, you can make minute adjustments to simple things, and then you can end up building a lot of things on the layers to really get precise image editing, right? Now let's learn about some of the things we can do with this layers panel. Let's come to this image. So this is a YouTube thumbnail that I want to work on, right? So let's see, I want to write Photoshop tutorial, right? What would I do? I have to come and select my text to come here and then come and type Photoshop let me decrease the size of this. So to decrease, you just hit Control T on your keyboard to bring up the control command. You hold Shift and then you can easily decrease its size like I'm doing, right? Like I'm doing like this. Exactly, right? So let me just change the color so you guys see it well, so it pops up well. So I'm just changing the color. So I can just come and change. Let me pick yellow. Yellow will stand out. Okay, I think this would be seen, right? So now that we have this, look at something. One advantage of the layers is when you look here, we have now a new text layer. It has created a new layer on top, right? So looking at this, the text is covering the eye of the subject, right? Now one thing that layer helps you to do is I can just double click and drag it beneath my subject. So look at it now, the text has gone behind my subject, right? So this is one of the creative ways that you can use layers in Photoshop, right? So it's just like stacking things on top of each other. If I bring it in front, what I'm saying is I want the text to be on top of my subject. If I bring it behind, I want the text to be behind my subject, right? And remember, you can use the eye icon here to turn off everything that you are seeing there. You can use the eye icon to turn on and off everything that you are seeing there, right? So always remember that. Okay, so now that you know how we can arrange layers in order to get precise editing, when you look down here, there are some stuffs that you have down here too. So I'll explain them real quick, right? And I'll come and explain what we have on top here, right? So looking down here, we have a first one here called the delete button, right? So looking at the delete button, what it does is, just as its name goes, it deletes stuff, right? So if I double click here and then I drag it to the delete button, we'll delete that layer, right? So now the text layer is gone. Let me hit Ctrl Z. Another way you can do it is to, when you've selected that layer, you can just come down here and then hit delete. The delete layer, and it will tell you delete Photoshop. So it will tell you to delete this layer. If you want to, just hit yes, and then the layer is gone. You get? So that is one of the ways you can use to delete layers, right? But let's say you want to create a new adjustment layer. Remember we said what? Layers are what? Stacks of transparencies on top of something, right? So we want to create a transparent layer on top of this subject like this, right? What can we do? When you come here, you can see that we have this plus icon. If you click on it, we'll create a transparent layer, right? But let's say we want to bring this transparent layer on top of our subject like this. So you drag it on top. To drag it, you just double click and then drag it on top, right? Now let's say we want to paint a blue painting on top of our subject or something like that, which is kind of ridiculous, but then yeah, we just want to do something like that. So you select the paint tool, the paint brush, right? And then you just come, you with the foreground color selected is blue here. So when you paint here, look at what will happen. If we paint, it would paint on the face of the subject, right? Because we are painting on top of a transparent layer. But one advantage of this is, if we have this layer selected, we can just move this. We can move the position of this because it's on a new layer, right? It's on a new layer. You can just move the position of this, right? Or maybe let's say we wanted to bring this behind the subject. What you can do is you just double click and drag this behind the subject, and you can see that it has now gone to the back of the subject. We can hit Ctrl T on our keyboard and then we can enlarge this or decrease this on our subject. You get? So this is one of the flexibilities you can get with the layers panel. It's just like stacking things on top of each other. So as you are working, you just be stacking a lot of things on top of each other, right? So if you look at, anytime you see an image, you just look at the image like this. So I don't want you to look at this particular side, just look at this image, right? So you look at it and you just understand how things are being stacked on top of each other to give you a final outcome or to give you a final product, right? Now if you understand this concept, you'll be able to create engaging thumbnails for your viewers. You'll be able to create a lot of engaging stuff for your viewers, right? Now one thing as well that you can do is, let's bring this layer on top, right? This paint layer on top, right? And if you want to name a layer, you can just double click on it and then you change it. So I can name this blue paint. You just double click on it and then you would be able to change the name, right? I oftentimes don't change my layer names, which is a bad practice, but it's good if you are starting out, right? If you don't really know the processes of Photoshop, you have to do that so that you get a bit knowledge about what you are doing. Okay, so now that we've done this, one thing that we can do is we can change the blend mode, right? And the blend mode is what you see on top here where they've written a normal. If you hit on the drop icon, look at it, and I scroll down, it will be telling me what all these blend modes do, right? So it will be telling me what all these blend modes do. So you can see when I hover my mouse on it, it gives me different effects. When I hover my mouse on it, it gives me different effects, right? And they all have their uses, right? They all have their, if I go to soft light, let me just say it, okay, you can now see that in as much as when it was abnormal, when this layer was abnormal, let me change it to normal first. Look at it. It was covering the subject's entire face. But if I bring it to soft light, it gives me just a soft blue light on top of the subject's face, right? And when you look at the right of that layer, you can clearly see that anytime you want to make any change, make sure that layer is selected, right? Make sure you've clicked on that layer to select it, right? Now you can just change its opacity, right? So maybe you want to change its opacity. You can see I'm changing opacity. When I bring it to 0, it has no effect. When I increase the opacity, that's my new changes. You get, so you can just add those filmic looks to your thing, the feel as well. You can just play around with these things, and then you get to understand how these layers panel work, right? Now let's say you've already worked on something. Let's say I've already worked on this subject and I don't want to move the subject, right? What you can do is you can easily lock the subject, right? So to lock the subject, let me just delete this blue layer, right? To lock the subject, you make sure that that subject layer is selected. So this subject layer is selected, and when you come on top, you can see that there's this lock icon here, right? If I click on it, it will lock this icon, right? So I don't have the chance to move this subject. You see, if I select it, that's going to select the background layer because I don't have the chance to move this subject. Similarly, when I lock this background layer, when I lock it, you can see that I'm unable to move anything because I've locked them. Once you lock something in Photoshop, you wouldn't be able to move it. To unlock it, you can just come and then you double click on it. That is one of the ways to unlock it. Or when you come here, you can just come and then come and unlock it from here again. You can just come and then you double click on it to unlock it. You get, let me lock the background layer. You get, so that is one of the ways you can do that, right? Now I've already spoken about the top ones. Let's continue with our downside, right? One thing that you can also do here is to create groups, right? And to create groups, there are different ways you can do them. One of the ways is you can select the first group that you want to create, and then hold shift on your keyboard and select the last one you want to create, and those in series would all be selected, right? So if I hit Control J on my keyboard, Control J on my keyboard, it would group them into one layer. Now what this has done is that it has grouped them into one folder, right? So it has made the layers panel a bit organized for me. But let me hit Control Z. Let's see, I wanted to select this but not the Photoshop layer, right? I wanted to select this but not the Photoshop layer, but I wanted to select the rectangle and then the rest of the layers. What you can do is, after selecting the first layer you want to select, you can hold Control and then just be clicking on the ones you want to select, just the ones you want to select. You get, with the shift one, when you click on the first one, you click on the last one, it will select everything in series. But when you hold Control, it will just select the ones that you want to select. And make sure you don't leave the Control, hold it whilst clicking on them. If I hit Control J, look at what will happen. It has created a new group without the Photoshop layer, right? Now look at something. You can see that now the Photoshop icon is gone. And why is it gone? It's gone because in the group layer is on top of the Photoshop layer. And in the group layer, when we open the group layer, we have this background layer. So if this background layer is on top of the Photoshop layer, it would cover it. That is what it's trying to tell you, right? So if I want my Photoshop icon back, I can just double click and then drag this back, and you can see that this is now back, right? But then this is now back, but can't be in how should I say, can't go behind the subject, because if it goes now, the subject is also behind because the subject is in this group, right? So if I really want to bring it back, then I have to include this Photoshop icon in the group layer so that it can come behind it. You get, so that is when you are using the group, please make sure you consider these things, right? Your arrangement of layers on your canvas are very important when you are working with Photoshop. You get, now let me just hit Control Z and bring it back. Okay, so this is how we were originally, right? Now when you look at the next side, the next thing that you can do is another thing is, if you want to just merge all these layers, you can just hit Shift Control E on your keyboard and everything will be merged into one layer, right? So now I don't have the flexibility to put anything at the back. If I move, it will move everything. It has made it one particular sheet, right? It has made everything one particular sheet, right? Let's say you are working with everything and then you feel like, oh, maybe I may don't know. These things are all fine. Sorry, I spoke to you. So for those who didn't understand the tree, where I've reached, everything there is fine. That's why I said, okay, you can just how should I say, merge them and then you work with other things that you want to work with. Let me just hit Control Z. If you want to undo anything, you just hit Control Z on your keyboard. Okay, now that we are done with this, let's move to the adjustment layer. Okay, so this part is what we call the adjustment layer. If I hit on this, this color that I've changed of cloth here was just made out of the adjustment layer, right? So let me just delete this and show you something. If you look here, I created a new selection for my cloth, so you could look, the cloth is a different thing altogether here, right? Let me hit Control Z and bring it back. So if I want to change the color of this cloth, I can come here and then pick an adjustment layer. An adjustment layer is something that will do changes to the layer that you've selected. So if I hit solid color, look at what will happen. If I hit solid color and I restrict it to this particular cloth, that is holding Alt on my keyboard and clicking on this, it will create a clipping mask, right? And if I want to let it blend seamlessly or look like a cloth, I have to change what? It's blending mode. You can come to blending mode and then select what would work with it, right? So I can come and choose linear dodge or anything at all, right? For this tutorial, let me just pick linear dodge, right? So now that I've picked linear dodge, you can clearly see that it has been it has changed the color of the cloth, right? So that is one thing in Photoshop that you can do, right? With this adjustment layer, let me just go back and hit Control Z. Okay, with these adjustment layers, they just do changes to anything that is on here, right? They do changes to anything that is on here, right? So if you come to this adjustment layer, we have a lot of adjustment layers. We have the gradient adjustment layer, we have the we have all these, right? But I'll be tackling hue and saturation and then the curves in a different video, right? So I wouldn't be talking about them in this layer max video. You get. Now on the next side that you can see is this max icon, right? What this max icon does is if I take a selection tool and then let's see on this layer I selected this particular side of the subject, right? If I hit max, what we'll do is we'll just select that portion and the rest that I didn't select will be taken out. The rest that I didn't select will be taken out. So just as you can see, the hair that I didn't select is taken out. Let me just hit Ctrl Z to bring it back, right? So that is basically it with the layers too. And we have this effect side, and this effect side also have a lot of things that I'll dive into in other lessons, right? I don't want to make this lesson compact, right? So the things that you need to understand is layers are just arrangements of sheets on top of each other. Layers are arrangements of sheets on top of each other, right? And if you want to duplicate a layer, let's say you want to make a layer twice, let's use this text tool. So I've selected the text. You can hit Ctrl J on your keyboard, right? And if I hit Ctrl J and I select the move tool, right, I'll be able to move this how should I say, this layer, right? So you can see that I've created a duplicate of this layer. If you hit Ctrl J on your keyboard, unless I want to bring this layer on top, this time I don't want to bring it beneath, what do? I'll come and select it and drag it on top of my text layer. So just as you can see, the first one is beneath it because it's under it, and the second one is on top of it. You get. So that is why. So arrangement of layers, if you understand this thing in the layer max, it will really help you, right? You have to know that the opacity will help you decrease how intense it is, or how, sorry, let me select the Photoshop, would help you select how intense you want it to be, how should I say it, how you want it to flow, and all those things, right? So just as you can see, I can increase or decrease the opacity, right? So just play around with it, get files, play around with the adjustment layers, and then I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.